You're sitting in a waiting room. No phone, no magazine, just a clock on the wall, ticking slower than it should, and 40 minutes still on it. Your leg starts bouncing. Your mind starts drifting to nothing in particular and everything at once. That itch under your skin, restless, irritated, almost painful, is boredom. You've felt it 1,000 times. You've never once wondered where it came from. Here's the strange part. For most of human history, this feeling may not have worked the same way at all. Ancient humans spent their entire lives without screens, without schedules, without anything resembling entertainment on demand. So did they sit around a fire 50,000 years ago feeling exactly what you feel in that waiting room? Or is boredom itself something newer than we assume, a symptom of the world we built, not a fixed piece of being human? That's the big question. And the answer says less about the past than it does about you, right now, on whatever screen you're watching this on. Start with the word itself. Language usually shows up right after a concept becomes common enough to need a name, and boredom is suspiciously late to the party. According to lexicographer research cited by the Oxford English Dictionary, the adjective boring doesn't appear in English until the 1830s, first documented in the writing of novelist Catherine Gore. The verb to bore, meaning to be tiresome, only shows up around 1768. That's not ancient. That's barely older than the steam engine. So what was there before it? Ennui. A French import, older, quieter, more melancholic than the sharp, itchy restlessness we call boredom today. Historian and researcher Patricia Meyer-Spaks, in her 1995 study on the subject, argued that boredom as a distinct noun only enters common usage around 1864, in the language of the industrial era. That timing is not a coincidence. Something about factories, clocks, and empty leisure time appears to have manufactured the exact feeling you had in that waiting room. So does that mean ancient humans literally couldn't feel bored? Not exactly. And here's where it gets strange. Cognitive neuroscientist James Dankert of the University of Waterloo has spent over a decade studying the psychology of boredom in his lab. In his 2020 book Out of My Skull, co-authored with psychologist John Eastwood, Dankert makes the case that boredom isn't the absence of stimulation. It's an active signal, a call to action that fires when your mind can't find a goal worth engaging with. That circuitry is ancient. What's modern is the environment that keeps triggering it without ever letting it resolve. Everyone assumes boredom is what happens when there's nothing to do. The truth is closer to the opposite. It's what happens when there's nothing meaningful to do, and hunter-gatherer life had almost no version of that gap. So what were ancient humans actually doing with all their time? Less than you'd think. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent over a year, from 1963 to 1965, living with and studying the Kungsan people of the Dobe area in the Kalahari Desert of Botswana. His field data, published in 1968, found that adults in the camp worked roughly 12 to 19 hours a week gathering food, a fraction of a standard modern work week. Even the hardest working hunter in the group logged a maximum of 32 hours in the food quest during his most active week. Later, researchers pushed back, arguing Lee's numbers left out food processing time. Cracking, grinding, cooking, factor that in, and the total climbs closer to 40 hours. Still roughly in line with, or shorter than, plenty of modern jobs. Either way, the picture isn't grinding, ceaseless survival. It's something closer to structured part-time work, wrapped around long stretches of open time. So what filled the rest of the week, if not chores and hunting? This is where the twist lands. You'd assume that much unstructured time, without books or screens or hobbies, would breed constant, grinding boredom. The archaeological and anthropological record suggests almost the opposite, that time was absorbed by something modern life has quietly engineered away: sustained social contact. Storytelling, music, ritual, and skill building, all happening in the same physical space all day with other people. There's a cognitive piece to this too. Researchers studying attention in the Bayaka hunter-gatherer community of the Congo Basin through Cambridge University's Department of Archaeology have found that traits treated as attention deficits in industrial classrooms, restlessness, rapid shifts of focus, high exploratory drive, appear to carry real adaptive value in a foraging context, where scanning constantly for food, threats, and opportunity matters more than sitting still. In other words, the brain wiring that makes a modern kid struggle through a lecture may be the same wiring that made an ancient forager exceptionally good at staying alive. So, how did ancient humans deal with empty time? Maybe the honest answer is they didn't have as much of it as we imagine, and what they did have was rarely truly empty. It was filled with people. Here's the second twist, and it's the one that stings. The evolutionary hunter versus farmer hypothesis, first proposed by Tom Hartman and later explored by ADHD researcher Russell Barkley, suggests boredom-prone, novelty-seeking brains weren't a design flaw at all. They were built for exactly the kind of world hunter-gatherers lived in: high variability, high stimulation, constantly shifting. Agriculture, and later industrial labor, is what asked those same brains to sit still, repeat the same task, and stare at the same wall for 8 hours straight. That's not a bug appearing in modern humans. That's an ancient brain, dropped into an environment it was never built for, screaming that something is wrong. So the real discomfort in that waiting room isn't boredom in some timeless universal sense. It's a very specific kind of starvation. A brain built for constant social and sensory richness, sitting alone under fluorescent light, with nothing to scan for and no one to talk to. You walked into this video sitting in a waiting room, watching a clock, feeling that itch under your skin. It turns out that itch isn't proof that ancient life was empty. It's proof of the opposite, that for most of human history, life was so full, so socially saturated, so wired for shifting attention. That true emptiness barely existed long enough to need a name. We didn't invent boredom by inventing free time. We invented it by inventing isolation and calling it comfort. The waiting room was never empty. We just forgot how to fill it with each other.